We've spent a lot of time on this channel making money feel exciting. The big move, the perfect timing, the trade you brag about later. So here's a confession. We think that instinct, the one that says investing should feel thrilling, is quietly costing regular people a fortune. Because the man who out-earned a lot of Wall Street did the most boring thing imaginable, over and over, for decades. He never made a single move you would post about. And when he died, the people closest to him were stunned by what he left behind. Let's decode this together. Almost $8 million. That's what a small-town janitor built, with no big salary and no lucky windfall. So here's the real question. If the secret wasn't a hot tip or a genius trade, then what was it? And could you actually copy it? Stay with us, because the answer is almost aggressively unexciting. Here's what actually happened. His name was Ronald Read, and he lived in Vermont. He worked as a gas station attendant for years, and later as a janitor. His car was old, his coat had patches, and by every outward sign he was a man of very modest means. Then he passed away in 2014 at the age of 92. His estate came in at close to $8 million. The people who knew him could hardly believe it. This was not a secret executive or a hidden business owner. He was, quite simply, the man who swept the floors. Sit with that gap for a second, because the distance between how he looked and what he owned is the whole lesson. And it wasn't luck. So how does an ordinary paycheck turn into that kind of money? Here's the part that almost disappoints people, because it is so plain. There was no secret, no inheritance, no lottery ticket, no brilliant trade that changed his life overnight. What Read did instead was almost stubbornly ordinary. He bought shares in large, familiar companies, the kind that have been around for generations. Reports on his holdings list names like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, and J.P. Morgan Chase. Not thrilling, not trendy, just solid businesses he understood. That last part matters more than it sounds. He never bought a company he couldn't explain to a neighbor. Understanding what you own is what let him hold on calmly while other people panicked. Then he did the single hardest thing in investing. He held on. Some of those companies he owned for years, and a number of them for decades. He spread his money across dozens of businesses at once, so no single mistake could ever wreck him. And whatever those companies paid him along the way, he reinvested, quietly buying a little more. And here's the detail that makes it stick. Even as his account grew into something enormous, his life never changed at all. Same modest house, same patched coat, same quiet routine. He let the money compound instead of letting it inflate his lifestyle, and that discipline is a huge part of the story. Now here's the villain of this whole story, and it isn't a bank or a scam. It's the craving for excitement. The feeling that if your money isn't doing something dramatic, you must be doing it wrong. Read felt no such pull. He treated investing like a slow, dull chore that simply had to be done. And that boredom is exactly why it worked. There's a reason boring wins so consistently. Every exciting money story is really an invitation to make a decision, and every decision is a chance to be wrong. Read barely made any decisions at all. Fewer moves meant fewer mistakes, and fewer mistakes meant time could do its slow, quiet work. Now watch what happens when you run the opposite playbook, the exciting one, at full speed. Back in 2008, Lehman Brothers, one of the biggest names on Wall Street, collapsed into the largest bankruptcy this country has ever seen. This was not a firm full of cautious, boring people. It was full of confident, brilliant, highly paid ones. And they failed anyway, because they did the one thing Read never would. They borrowed heavily to make their bets far bigger than they could afford to lose. That move has a name. It's called leverage, which just means using borrowed money to supersize a bet. When it works, you look like the smartest person in the room. The moment it turns, the losses hit just as hard in the other direction, except now you owe money you never had. An examiner's report later raised credible questions about how the firm dressed up its books in the run-up to the fall. None of that was boring, and that was precisely the problem. Here's the part that should stick with you. Status at the top protected no one. Powerful, celebrated people watched their reputations vanish into the wreckage, while a quiet janitor in Vermont, doing the dull thing year after year, came out the other side with a fortune. That contrast is the answer to our opening question. The secret was never excitement. It was the opposite of excitement. So what does copying a boring janitor actually look like for you today? This is going to be the least exciting money advice you hear all week, and that is the entire point. Start with the boring core. Instead of hunting for the one perfect stock, you can own a wide slice of the market at once through a low-cost index fund, which is simply a basket that holds many companies together. It is deliberately unexciting, and it spreads your risk the same way Read's dozens of companies did. Expect this to feel like missing out, especially when someone in a group chat is bragging about a stock that tripled. That feeling is not a signal to act. It is usually the exact moment Read would have done nothing. Then remove yourself from the decision. The reason most people never invest like Read isn't knowledge, it's willpower. They wait for the right moment, and the right moment never announces itself. So the single most useful thing you can do this week is set up one automatic recurring contribution, even a small one. Automating it means you never have to feel brave or clever again. The money just goes, whether the headlines are calm or on fire. And the amount matters less than you think at the start. What actually moves the needle is that it happens every single month, without a debate, without a mood, without waiting for a green light that never comes. And then, this is the hard part, you do nothing. You let it sit. Resist the urge to check it every day or to yank it out the first scary week. Boring, reliable, and almost completely hands-off. That is the whole method, and it was hiding in plain sight the entire time. So what do we keep an eye on from here? A few things worth your attention. First, watch your own behavior the next time markets have a genuinely ugly week, because your reaction matters far more than any pick you will ever make. The people who stay boring and keep buying tend to be the ones still standing years later. Second, take 5 minutes right now and look at whether anything you own is actually automated. If every contribution still depends on you remembering and feeling motivated, that is the gap between you and Read's method, and it is fixable today. And third, keep noticing this pattern in the news, because it repeats forever. Every few years, some brilliant, exciting, heavily leveraged story ends the way Lehman did. The names change. What never changes is the lesson. This is a story that keeps writing new chapters, and we will be watching the next one closely. Here's the takeaway we would leave you with. The most powerful thing you can do with your money is also the most boring, and that is not a flaw in the plan. That is the plan. Boring is not the price you pay for a good outcome. It is the thing that quietly makes one possible. A quiet janitor proved that patience, wide diversification, and spending less than you earn can quietly build something enormous. On the other end, a room full of geniuses proved that chasing excitement with borrowed money can just as quietly and quickly tear it all down. So the one small step worth taking this week is to make investing boring on purpose. Automate one contribution, spread it wide, and then leave it alone. Quick reminder, everything we cover on Decoded Money is for educational purposes only. None of this is financial advice, and we're not licensed financial advisors. Before you make any money moves, do your own research and talk to someone who knows your specific situation. If this was useful, hit subscribe. We do this every week. That's the Decode for this week. We'll see you in the next one.